Morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. Sunday, the 1st of March 2015, getting set up for the first half of Outsiders. It'll be a two-part broadcast with First Dog on the Moon, I presume.
Time now for Outsiders. I'm Barry Cassidy, and you're not.
Many thanks to Uncle Barry. Our Outsiders this morning, a small and perfectly formed team of Nick Fike, editor of The Monthly, and Tricia Jar, policy analyst for the Centre for Independent Studies. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Morning.
Just two of us. Well, three, actually, if you include me. I was being perhaps unnecessarily self-deprecating there and just completely absenting myself from the conversation. I'm sorry.
Please don't.
Oh, all right then. Should we talk about leadership? Do you think we should? Is it? I wonder, Trish, as much as this concerns, as the Prime Minister would put it, the Beltway, Canberra insiders, is this actually a source of broad community concern, do you think?
I think it is. There was polling a few weeks ago that suggested that the broad sentiment was that, we turfed out Labor because we didn't like all this instability and this infighting. Now we've got these guys and they do exactly the same thing. So I think that's probably a source of consternation. But whether that means that they shouldn't change the leadership or whether that means they should, I don't know.
Irritation. Do you think that's it, Chris? Is that the... sorry, Nick, is that the sort of the public sentiment? Is it just that sort of sense of vague exasperation?
I'm sure there's a lot of exasperation, and the idea that these are beltway issues. I mean, we're talking about the leadership of the country.
They are, but
and the Prime Minister. I think it. Of course, people are irritated. I think the business. It's interesting that the business community seem to be expressing this through journalists as well. I mean, as well as all the backbenchers and large sections of the cabinet. I think the idea that this is some sort of a beat up is ludicrous. I mean, these are serious problems.
Well, the serious side of it, we have the Prime Minister talking now about the Medicare co-payment. I mean, basically unpicking the last vestige of the budget strategy that got them into so much trouble in the past year. I mean, the key problem here is that we are now seeing all policy, all that government does, through this prism of what does this do for my possibilities as leader? How does this shore up my position? I mean, that's no way to run a country.
No, I mean, when good governments apparently started, just over a week ago. And since then, it seems to have consisted of jettisoning long-held kind of principles and policies. They were open for business, apparently, this government, and then suddenly they're introducing foreign real estate fees, or they're talking about it. The GP co-payment, which was something that they talked about the economic importance of introducing a price signal like this for a year or so. This is seeping into the broad party platform now, and I don't think anyone really knows what to expect at this point.
An extraordinary week, Tricia, for those sorts of contradictions, hasn't it been? I mean, everything that you thought the government stood for can be unpicked if it helps, prop up the votes of the right internally of the party.
I don't know if it's necessarily about the votes of the right in the party. I think it is, I guess, a desperate sort of scrambling for power. I mean, I know that parts of the Liberal base are very kind of unhappy about what's been happening, because they went to the last budget with a set of they didn't go to the budget. They came out of the budget with a set of policies that, allegedly kept the main election promise, which was to bring the budget back into surplus. And yet they've been departing from all of those. And then the government can kind of just blame it on the Senate. But at the same time, it seems as though they never really put in the hard yards trying to explain it to anyone about, the relevant ministers weren't there selling the policies. And Joe Hockey ended up getting lumped with all the blame. So, I mean, and now that they're all just stepping back from all of it, I think it's really disappointing, actually.
Is there a thing there too, Tricia, about the fairly independent nature of internal Liberal Party politics as against the Labor Party? The Labor Party, you can kind of see where the blocks are going, and you can things are more ruthless and disciplined. It's part of the problem we have here, that within the Liberal Party it's a far more contestable thing, and that people make up their individual minds around things. It's a much harder thing to either get a bead on or to marshal.
I think that's probably true to an extent, although there's always this joke about, this ironic joke that goes around, oh, there are no factions in the Liberal Party. We all know that it's not absolutely not true if the discussion around Malcolm Turnbull versus Tony Abbott is anything to go by. That's probably part of it, but I think largely it's to do with the fact that, a bunch of these backbenchers were elected, as they saw it, elected to be better than Labor, and the way that it's going, they're not doing that. So I think there's very understandable frustration.
And then frustration too, I suspect, about the course of the Prime Minister's conduct this week.
Yeah, I think it's been very clear for a long time that the general public would give the government enough rope if they seem to be acting in a mature way, delivering what are sort of broadly centrist ideas. I think the message went to the government after the budget: don't do these things that you're laying on us. Like, don't cut health when you said that you wouldn't. Don't cut education, deregulate when you never said that you would. These sorts of promises. It was so clear that the government sort of idea was being rejected, that this budget was rejected. People wanted something that was a little bit more, it was a more sort of centrist direction that people required. The sensible centre
of Malcolm Turnbull.
That was a very clear message that went out. And in the past week, really, Tony Abbott's done the opposite. He's gone on the attack on every front, really. And if this is the idea of good government, then where do we go?
And no more conspicuously on the attack than in that attack that was levelled at Gillian Triggs.
Madam Speaker, it is precisely because the President of the Human Rights Commission was incapable of appreciating the difference between starting the boats and stopping the boats, the difference between putting people into detention and taking people out of detention. It's precisely because the President of the Human Rights Commission was incapable of understanding this distinction that this government has lost confidence in her.
And Tricia, I mean, definitive Tony Abbott, in a sense, his attack on Gillian Triggs, that it was slogan-based and aggressive.
Oh, I just don't understand how they can talk about how leadership speculation is just Canberra insider nonsense, and then they go and pull something like this, which is the definition of Canberra insider nonsense. It's literally just saying that, oh, the Liberal Party feels hard done by what the Human Rights Commission did or didn't do based on when they timed their report or whatever. There might be some truth to that. I don't know. But it is a very, very niche issue. I mean, I'm pretty sure if you went...
Sign up or go underground in the summer of 80.
All, putting this into the frame of leadership, all Malcolm Turnbull had to do to make an extraordinary statement on his own behalf and to sort of reveal the tactic was to come out and say, actually, it's about those children.
Yeah, well, no one knew who Gillian Triggs was before this week. The broad mass of the Australian public wouldn't have been aware of what the sort of statutory role of the Human Rights Commission was. All of these things were really by the by for most people.
And now we get the impression too of not only the government not dealing with the kids, and not only the government sort of raising this as an issue, but the spectacle of the government also dealing in a way that goes against basic principle, Westminster principle, with the head of a statutory organisation.
Well, yeah, this separation of powers issue, it's not a very conservative thing to do, to reach across the lines of government, across the separation, and try to destroy the career of someone, not to mention the bad look of bullying a professional, intelligent woman.
And well, speaking of bullying of women, we had several instances of that in Senate estimates through the week.
As a matter of fact, Senator Wong, I didn't interrupt Professor Triggs once.
You did
not once, but I was constantly interrupted by you.
It is
Please
true that
have the manners to allow the witness to finish his answer without speaking across him.
It is true that you didn't interrupt Professor Triggs, but you sat there while your bother boys interrupted her persistently and you did nothing about it.
Senator Wong, please grow up. These are important matters.
Yes.
All I ask is that the officials be treated with an elementary level of courtesy.
Tricia, Senator Wong keeping her cool there in the face of the Attorney-General's request that she grow up?
It's really hard to kind of to look at someone and say, "Oh, you deserve the moral high ground in this respect." It's just become so, on both sides, it's become gutter politics. I mean, I didn't hear, the so-called bother boys, that discussion when they were interrupting Professor Triggs, so I can't say whether Penny Wong's criticism was in the right or in the wrong. But I mean, I understand at this point that it's just mudslinging, really. I mean, I'm just really disappointed, I guess.
Which takes you to the position that as we have Parliament resuming this week, I guess the big question is whether it's on. And if we're to take Abba's word for it, I would say, Nick,
It's on.
It's on.
the media gets very excited about these things, and there's a sense in which it's sort of media propelled. But there must be something more there, Nick. Can we expect, do you think, anything from party room meetings in the next couple of days?
Look, during the week it was reported that Malcolm Turnbull now had the numbers by a couple of different news sources, but then, of course, large numbers of the media, large parts of the media are saying, no, we're going to wait. And then there's the question of timing. If it doesn't happen in the next week or two, are we too close to the budget? As in, would anyone want to take that position when, amidst all the uncertainty?
That assumes that actual policy matters, that it's not just...
Well, yeah, there's that too, and none of us know whether policy counts anymore.
Should they just put us out of our misery, Tricia, and just get this thing over and done with?
Well, I think if they did, it would probably be quite bad, considering there's the New South Wales state election. Apparently that was the other consideration, that they didn't want to, kind of have the federal mess overshadowing what they're looking forward to as a fairly decisive re-election of the bad government here in New South Wales.
And it could lead to a very Laboresque mess internally in the Liberal Party, even with a new leader. The bleeding may not stop.
Oh, that's definitely true. I don't know whether they should, I mean, I think everyone accepts that Tony Abbott can't last the year as Prime Minister. It doesn't seem to be physically possible, that based on the numbers that we had. But I don't know, whether they should or shouldn't, I think, is really probably a matter for the Liberal Party, and they need to weigh up the costs and the benefits, because if one of the problems, of course, is the fact that Malcolm Turnbull is really unpopular with the Liberal Party members who, go to fundraisers and they donate the money and they donate the time. They go to, they man the booths, they hand out the how to votes, and if that base deserts them with Malcolm Turnbull as leader, they might look at something like Victoria, where the same thing happened.
Or just very quickly, Nick, I mean, that base seems to be shifting against instability, for one thing.
Yeah, well, it's very, it's easy to be optimistic about Turnbull as a Prime Minister getting in, that this will lift everything, and that once the poll numbers are up, everything will be fine again. But we can't forget that he is still governing. He would still be in charge of the same party. He'd be doing it without a large section of the party behind him, as Trish said. But
we've seen how that plays out before.
And we've seen it before. The last time he was leader, he ended up with his poll numbers were lower than Abbotts are at the moment.
Well, this week will be telling. We'll watch the next few days with interest. Thanks to our pair of beautifully formed outsiders this morning. They've been Nick Fike, editor of The Monthly, and Tricia Jar.
Okay, we're now going to cut this movie and move on to the first Moondog.